RCM Desktop, written by facilitators for facilitators. Welcome to this demonstration of RCM Desktop. This is where the program usually opens up. It is the control center, and it's where you have access to all other parts of the system. It never goes away, so there is always a button for it in this taskbar at the bottom of the screen. Some aspects of RCM Desktop are very similar to other RCM software titles. So, for example, there's a place to store and create RCM analyses. There's a place to create and store assets in a hierarchy. And there is the ability to associate those assets with RCM analyses. There's a place to create lookup lists, like lists of skills, equipment states, redesign types, and so on. And there's somewhere where you can specify and determine equipment criticalities, and so on. However, we're going to concentrate on features that make RCM Desktop stand out from other RCM software. The first main difference is that RCM Desktop's not tied to any particular version of RCM. It can actually work with any RCM decision logic, and there's a few example ones in this demonstration database shown on the screen now. You can, if you wish, even write your own. So here's one that's being written, it's not yet finished. Here's another one which is finished. This is NES 45, the RCM decision logic used by the British Royal Navy. Okay, we'll just shut those ones down. There is a huge array of facilitator productivity features. This is the second major difference between RCM Desktop and other software titles. These enable you to eliminate the reams of flipchart paper that we used to have on the walls in the old days. They enable analyses to be documented in full by the facilitator live during the RCM review meetings. This saves the facilitator and the review group members a lot of time, therefore making them much more efficient. And that's something that's very important for a company with many large sites that have a large number of RCM analyses to do. So now we'll have a look at some of these features. This is the analysis list window. There's just a few analyses in here. Some real ones, some of our case studies, and an empty demonstration analysis. So we'll go to the empty one. You may notice several tabs across the top of the screen here. They provide access to various different parts of the analysis, and we'll look at some of those later on. The one we're in at the moment is called the Facilitate tab. It's called this because it is where the facilitator spends most of their time with the RCM review group members during meetings. So therefore this is what is usually projected onto a screen during the meetings, so everyone in the room needs to be able to read it. So RCM Desktop gives you the ability to change the font size that is used for a lot of the data. So let's pick 12 point for the sake of this demonstration. Right, so this is an empty analysis, so let's add some functions. Function 1, function 2, function 3, function 4, and one more, function 5. You may have noticed with each of those functions a button with the function number has appeared on the left hand side here in the analysis navigator. Okay, let's go back to function 1 and start adding some functional failures for it. So we'll put a couple of these in: functional failure 1A and functional failure 1B. And you will see buttons for those two functional failures have also appeared here in the analysis navigator. So back to 1A and let's input some failure modes. So failure mode 1A1 and enter some effects for it. Failure mode 1A2 and give that one some effects. And failure mode 1A3 also with some effects. Right, moving on to function 5. Facilitators find very often that when they are adding a new functional failure, the words that they type in are actually very similar, if not identical, to many of the words already in the parent function. So RCM Desktop eliminates the need to do much of that typing by providing the facilitator with a button which copies the words of the functional failure into into the new functional failure box. And if the function is worded in a particular way, like this one is, it's the preferred format for wording of a hidden function, it will actually do all of the writing for the functional failure, and therefore the facilitator in this particular case doesn't need to do any typing at all, just clicks on OK. So let's add a failure mode into there, 5A1. So you've probably noticed that I've entered quite a lot of text very quickly, and that was done using one of the very effective time-saving features of RCM Desktop, which is its auto text feature. It's where the facilitator can very quickly, just using short abbreviations, enter commonly used phrases or sentences whenever required. So for example, in the failure effects for this hidden failure, we may well want to start off with something like "will not matter if it occurs on its own," and then finish that off with a fair bit more text, which is admittedly some of it specific to this failure mode for the demonstration, but a lot of it is also fairly generic stuff which could apply to many hidden failures. It's very easy for the facilitator to enter text like this. Let's imagine the facilitator enters something like increased risk of injury to personnel, and they know that they're going to need to use those exact words several times during this analysis, and maybe in other analyses as well. So in that case, all they need to do is highlight the text, click Ctrl S on the keyboard, and then enter some abbreviation for that. So increased risk of injury, IRI, will probably do. And just to prove that it works, I will enter it again, IRI, and that saves the facilitator an awful lot of time when he's got several of those in their armory when writing failure effects, task descriptions, and so on. Navigating around an analysis is easy because, as I've already mentioned, every function, functional failure, and failure mode, when it's entered, a button for it appears here in the analysis navigator. So let's use that to quickly go back to 1A1. We just simply click on the button, and here we are. Another time-saving feature is how easy it is for the facilitator to record their answers to the decision logic questions. So here are the decision logic questions laid out exactly as they are on the printed RCM decision logic. If necessary, the facilitator can hover over the label of one of those questions just to get a reminder of the text of the question, and when they are ready to answer it, it's simply a case of clicking on either the yes or the no accordingly. So let's take this failure mode through the decision logic. Will it become evident to the operating crew? Yes, it will. So we just simply click on yes, and it becomes bold to show that that question now has an answer. Could it affect safety? Well, the answer to that is yes, and in this particular case, let's say the facilitator wants to record why. So we click on the question label, and we can answer some supporting comments to explain why the answer to that was yes. When there are supporting comments against a question, this asterisk appears, and if you hover over it as a pop-up hint, it will show you what those supporting comments are. That takes us down the safety column. Let's say the answer to this question is no, because there's no practical warning sign we can go looking for, and the answer to S2 and S3 are also no, because this particular failure occurs at random, and we got nowhere near any tasks that we could consider combining in S4, so the answer to that is no. The consequences we've seen as safety, and no from S4 takes us to compulsory redesign. So we need to record a redesign now for this failure mode. So I'll quickly go down to the redesign section, and we'll add in a redesign that is compulsory. For its title, we'll just put that we need an improved door handle. This one keeps falling off, and we'll put in a little bit of text just to explain what the problem is, to help the designer sort that out later on. Redesigns, it's just one of the many sections that are here underneath the failure mode. You can record a large amount of information against each individual failure mode. It's organized into separate sections. You can scroll down through all of these sections vertically, but a quick way of getting where you need to go is to use these shortcut links for them that are down here on the left hand side. So as you just saw, when I wanted to enter a redesign, I just clicked on the link for redesigns, and that took us straight there. Each of these sections can be collapsed if necessary, and expanded again afterwards. But if there are sections that the facilitator just isn't going to use for whatever reason, and doesn't want to see the clutter of unused sections, it's very easy to hide them. When a section is hidden, the text of its link here on the left hand side goes grey, just as a reminder that that's a hidden section. But if you want a hidden section back, you just simply click on the link and you're straight back to it. Okay, let's move on to 1A3. When a review group and facilitator get good and used to working with each other, quite often they will know where a failure mode is going to end up in the decision logic, particularly if it's like this one, which is going to end up at non-operational, not consequences, no scheduled maintenance. In this case, the facilitator can simply double click in the last of the questions, and RCM Desktop works out what the answers to all the previous questions must have been and fills those in automatically. And it also automatically looked up that that's non-operational consequences, and what comes out of a no in N3 is this decision, no scheduled maintenance. So that can save the facilitator a fair bit of time. Also, facilitators often find that one failure mode is very similar to a previous one, either in the same analysis or in some other analysis. So RCM Desktop allows the facilitator to instantly copy lots of individual different data elements from another failure mode into the one they're working on. So let's illustrate that. Let's move on to functional failure 1B and enter a new failure mode 1B1. And we've just done that when someone remembers that there was a very similar failure mode in another analysis that we already did. In that case, RCM Desktop allows you to select the other analysis, press Alt-T to tile those two analyses together so we can see them both on the screen at the same time. So let's make sure it knows we are in 1B1 in the analysis we are working on, and it happens to be similar to 1B1 in this other analysis. So I can right click on 1B1 and then choose which attributes of the failure mode I would like to copy. So let's say we want the effects, the decision logic responses, maintenance task if there is one, and just click on OK. So all of that information from 1B1 in this analysis on the right hand side has now been copied over to the analysis we are working on. So we'll go back to that one and show that the effects have been entered, all these decision logic responses have been entered, including the supporting comments, quite a bit there, and the maintenance task, and we'll see if there was a redesign. No, there wasn't. So that is a very big time saver for facilitators. We may even want to copy an entire function from another analysis, so let's repeat what we just did, get the two analyses side by side, and let's say, oh look, we haven't got that function in our analysis. We would like to have it, including its failure modes, so we simply drag it across to the one we're working on, and RCM Desktop does all the hard work for you, copies that function, its functional failures and its failure modes all over into the analysis we're working on. Very often when, certainly in the early days of working with a review group, the facilitator might need to explain a little bit about the question that they're asking from the RCM decision logic. This is very easy for them to do. The facilitator, just by pressing Ctrl-D, can instantly display the RCM decision logic that applies to the analysis being edited. He can click on whichever box and zoom in to the individual technical feasibility and worth doing questions within that box. This helps him to remind the group of exactly what the questions are, but also to keep them all focused together on the same question whenever necessary. If several sites have similar equipment, there may be a need to use an analysis from one site as a template for an analysis on another site. So to do that, we can actually copy an entire analysis by going back to the analysis list window. So there's the demo analysis we've been working on so far. So let's say we would like a copy of it. So we click on the make a copy of. It needs to be closed first, so it just asks for permission. We'll give it a new name. We'll just leave it as copy of demo. Leave everything else at their defaults and click on OK. And there it is, our new copy of this analysis. If we open it up, just to show everything is there. So that will look identical to the demo analysis that we've been working on up to now so far in this video. So the chances are that much of this copy analysis will be applicable with just minor tweaking to the new piece of equipment that it needs to apply to. Sometimes, however, the operating context of a piece of equipment, even though it's identical to another piece of equipment, the differences are such that the decisions that were made in the analysis simply do not apply in the vast majority of cases, and it's quicker and more productive simply to ditch all of those and take the failure modes and effects through the decision logic afresh. So that's possible by, again, going back to the analysis list window. So there's our copy selected. If we click on this button here, that will remove all of the decisions that were taken going through the decision logic. You can see at the moment it says we have 2 tasks and 1 redesign that we've put in so far. So if I say we need to get rid of those, it's done it. So now we have 0 tasks and 0 redesigns. So if we open that analysis again, we will indeed find here's 1A1, which we took down through the safety column. All of that has now disappeared, ready to be taken through again in the new operating context. One of the responsibilities of a facilitator is to do financial worth doing calculations for scheduled maintenance tasks to see if it is cheaper to do the task than not do the task. RCM Desktop makes this very easy with its worth doing calculator. So let's move on to 1B1 and let's pretend we're in box 01 considering an on-condition task. The warning sign we might look for doing this task is the fact that the door is slow to operate, and we have a PF interval of at least a year, so we're considering once every 6 months doing a door timing test, and now need to know, is it worth it? So to do that, we click on the Worth Doing Calculator button, and up comes the calculator. The facilitator merely has to concentrate on the input numbers, and the calculator will do the hard work. So let's have a look at what's required. First of all, there's some background information. It's an on-condition task that we are considering. In this analysis, we have already stated that downtime costs us £1,000 per hour, and the average cost of labour here is £50 an hour. Next we move on to this MTBF tab. This is where we tell the calculator how often the failure mode is likely to occur, and there's various ways of doing that. We can calculate it, which we'll do in a second. We can estimate it if we don't have any failure history to do a calculation. We can say we simply looked it up in some reference and say what it was we looked up. We can even say we don't know what the MTBF is and ask the calculator to work out how unreliable the equipment needs to be to make this task worth doing. However, we do have some failure history. We know we've had 57 failures in 10 years experience of 38 items, so it's used that information to calculate the MTBF. Next, on to cost of failure. So this is how much it costs us if we're not doing any maintenance, and the failure therefore takes us by surprise. Well, delay to the ship is 1 hour, so we have 1 hour's worth of operational consequences. We need 8 man-hours to do the repair, and we need some material. In this case it's a door ram that's failed. We need 2 of those at a cost of 275 each. Now to the on-condition task that we're considering. To do the task there is no downtime. The door has to be operational while we're doing the task, so that is 0. We're considering doing this task every 6 months, so we enter that in there. And the review group members have stated that there's no real need to do a door timing check for at least the first 5 years of use of the door rams, so we can delay the first instance of the task by 5 years. Doing the task, the door timing check, is just 15 minutes, and we don't need any materials, and we reckon the task is 100% effective. On average, every 6 or so years the door will be timed as going slowly, so we will need to do a follow-on repair. That can be done reasonably quickly and doesn't delay the ship, so again there's no downtime associated with that, so that is 0. It's 8 man-hours of labour, it's the same repair as before, and we will need the same materials, so RCM Desktop allows you to copy those across very quickly. So that's all the input numbers put in now. So we go to the Decision tab, and it does all of the difficult calculations, something that some facilitators get a bit concerned about having to do in front of other people. And we can see if we do the task it's just under 150 per year, if we don't do the task it's just under 300 per year. So yes, the task is worth doing. So that calculation now needs documenting in the supporting comments back in RCM Desktop. That is very easy to do. The facilitator simply clicks on this button here, and that puts the supporting comments that have been created by writing up that task into the Windows clipboard. I'll quickly just paste these into Notepad so that you can see them for the purposes of the demo. So this is the text produced by the calculator. All the facilitator had to do was enter the input numbers, and the calculator has written all of this, saving the facilitator from an awful lot of typing up. So that's in the clipboard, so that can now be pasted into the supporting comments box. So in it goes, save those. So now if we hover over here we can see the whole of the text for that calculation is now saved against box 01. Another type of calculation that some facilitators worry about is a failure finding interval calculation. To have a look at how RCM Desktop does those, let's go back to our complete analysis and have a look at 8A2. So this failure mode at the moment is in box H4 in the RCM decision logic, and it's time to do a failure finding interval calculation. So to do that we click on the calculator button. The facilitator's first job is to choose which of the available formulae to use. Usually they will know which one it is, but if there's any doubt they can click on the help button and just answer some simple questions which will determine which of the formulae to use, Does the multiple failure affect safety? In this case, yes it does. Can the failure finding task cause a failure? No, not in this case. Is it a voting system? No, it isn't. So we need to use Formula 2. Click on OK, and if it wasn't already at that one, the calculator would have switched to the correct formula. So now the facilitator just needs to concentrate on the input numbers and let the calculator do the difficult bit. One of the inputs required is the reliability of the protective device. So we can calculate that, estimate it somehow, or look it up from a reference. Again, we have some failure history, so we will calculate it. So let's just tell it what it is we are calculating. The remote closing override valves, MTBF, which is called MTIV. We have 38 of these, and they've been in service for an average of 10 years, and in that time we have experienced 7 failures. So if we calculate that, we get an MTBF of 54 years. So that's one of the input numbers. This button will allow us to copy that directly into the calculator. It was MTIV that we calculated, so we'll click on this one. You don't have to, but just to prove that it's done it, we'll go back to the FIFI tab and we can see Reliability Protective Device has now been entered automatically because we clicked on that button. Also available down here is this Append to Notepad button. Before clicking on it, I will just show you this notepad. It's blank at the moment. This is an area where the facilitator can make any useful notes about the calculation. So how we calculated the reliability of the protective device is certainly a very useful thing to know. So if we click on Append to Notepad, that has written up that calculation in text and entered it into the notepad for us. So let's put some more in here. One of the other input numbers is how often the protection is required, how often it is demanded. That's known as MTED. So let's say that's 1400 years, which came from the vessel's safety case. And another important number is this one, known as the tolerable mean time between multiple failures, and that the group have assumed to be 500,000 years. So we need to put those into the calculator. That was 500,000 years, and this one was 1400. One protective device. Click on Calculate FIFI, and we've got 0.3 years, so let's put that into months. So just over 3.6 months. The calculation needs writing up, so we click on Append that to the notepad, and the notepad now contains text written by the calculator to document the calculation. So we have a failure finding interval of 3.6 months, so let's say that is rounded down to 3 months. To get that back into the supporting comments for box H4, we click on this button here, which copies all the calculation information into the failure mode and pastes the calculation itself into H4's supporting comments. So there it is. Okay, let's go back to the empty demo, the one we were working on right at the beginning. The facilitator may prefer the functions in a different order from the order they were first written in. So let's assume he actually wants function 5 now to be function 1, so to do that we simply just drag 5 and drop it on top of 1, and what was 5 now becomes function 1. We may need to move something because it's in the wrong place, so let's say functional failure 6a, the facilitator has decided that would sit much better under function 4, so we simply drag 6a to 4. So 4, which had no functional failures before, now has the one we moved, and 6, which did have 2 functional failures, now only has 1. We can renumber an RCM analysis at any time. Let's say function 3, we've decided we don't need that anymore, so we delete it. And if we look at just the list of functions, we can see there's now a gap in the function numbers. So we can deal with that by clicking on renumber, click on OK, and the renumbering is done very quickly. There is now no longer a gap in the numbers. Let's go to 2B and add another failure mode. Failure mode 2B2. Something else that can be a worry to facilitators is their spelling, but RCM Desktop helps take the worry out of that by checking your spelling as you type. So it's recognised this word is incorrect. Facilitator can right click and choose the correct spelling. Also, the auto text feature that we looked at earlier on can be used to help avoid spelling mistakes. Quite a common one is people type accidentally T-E-H when they mean T-H-E. So if I do that, it recognises that and automatically makes the correction. Okay, back to our complete example. Let's have a look at 1B1 because we know that one has a task. So this task has a title, door timing check. It says who we're going to get to do the task and how often the task should be done, but there's much more information that can be added if you wish to do so. In this tab we can enter exactly how to do the task, so a description of what actually needs to be done. Here we can enter some safety precautions that need to be taken before doing the task if necessary. If we need any materials, need any tools, stopwatch in this case, it's just a timing check, and so on. It can all be added into the maintenance task. Right, at the beginning I said there were lots of other tabs across the top. Let's have a look at some of those. So here's the list of maintenance tasks which need to be implemented into our MMS. Many of them will have similar intervals and be done on a similar part of the equipment by someone with similar skills. So it will make sense to group a lot of these tasks together so that they can be done at the same time by the same person. So an easy way to do that is to see which ones have similar intervals. So we click on the interval column heading to sort by that column, and click on done by, shift click on done by to sort also by that column. So we can see that we have 3 tasks here with an interval of 6 months, all to be done by the maintenance engineer. So it would therefore make sense to group these together. So we do that by clicking on the first of them and shift clicking on the last of them. That selects them all together, and we then click on create task group. The task group is created and we're taken to the task groups tab, and the task group is opened up so that we can finish editing it. Let's say we need to call this a check, and that is its number. Some of this you'll have noticed was pre-populated by the software based on some defaults defined elsewhere. Let's say the title, we're going to call it something like Basic Checks. In this safety tab, those two safety precautions have been put in as defaults, again based on data elsewhere, so we'll leave those as they are. Task description, we have got several lines in here. These come from the description tab of the 3 individual tasks that make up this task group. So that's where these numbers 1, 2 and 3 in square brackets come from. But those numbers also make sure that when this task is copied to the clipboard in rich text format, that this description tab is correctly formatted. If necessary, you can enter materials, documentation and tools required. Again, if there is anything in there, it has come from the individual tasks, so we don't need that information repeated 2 times. So we make a minor edit to that. So the facilitator will find much of the information is already written. Once they've got it correct, click on Update, and the task is now complete. You can see that where there is a lot of text in a particular field, this makes the row take up a lot of vertical space. If you wish to, you can enforce the row only to take up a single line by toggling the row height switch. Also, it shows which individual maintenance tasks were grouped together to make this task group, and you can collapse that and expand that as necessary. So when you've got all of your task groups written, there'll be several of these on this screen, and you need to get these into your MMS. One way of doing that is exporting to Excel or any other format that your MMS is capable of importing. So we'll choose Excel. Let's say we don't want to expand because we don't need to see the individual task numbers. Click on OK, and there it is. So there's only one in it at the moment, but that would contain all of the tasks ready for importing directly into your MMS. Some MMSs allow you to write up tasks in rich text, so to have them nicely formatted. If that is the case, RCM Desktop provides this Copy Task Group button. So if I do that for the task we've just created and paste that into WordPad, it nicely formats the task, lays it out nicely. There were those step numbers in square brackets that I was talking about before. I've just pasted it here into WordPad to illustrate what it looks like. You can paste it directly into a rich text box in your MMS. Okay, finished with that. So let's look at some more of the tabs across the top. Here is the Worksheet tab. It's very similar to a paper Aladon information worksheet. It's not intended for live data entry, but it's somewhere where the facilitator outside of the RCM meetings can come and tidy up an RCM analysis. It's useful for that because we can see several failure modes at a time. We can see all of the decision logic responses and supporting comments all at one time. So it's much more useful for getting an overview of a failure mode or several failure modes. So very useful for doing the post-meeting tidying up. Another useful tab is the Photographs tab. The Facilitator just tells RCM Desktop where on a disk drive to go and find photographs and drawings. They can save a great deal of time in an RCM analysis. It's easy to zoom in on a photo, have a look at something you need to see, or on a drawing, and these can save an awful lot of time during the meetings. This is the Significant Findings tab. This is just somewhere where the facilitator can record anything unusual or urgent that has been found during the RCM analysis, and the reason for documenting them separately is because they are printed very close to the front of the audit report, which we shall look at a little bit later on. The Properties tab, this is where the facilitator can enter background information about the analysis. So any comments, who took part in the analysis, who facilitated, what equipment is included or not included in the analysis, any assumptions that have been made, and if necessary a glossary of terms. Next we'll look at tasks. We were already here to do task grouping. Another reason for this particular tab is it enables the facilitator to quickly find a task that they've already written before, maybe earlier in the day or on a previous day. To find other tasks, it's very easy. We press F9 to bring up the filter row. We know we're looking for a task that was something to do with the door seal, so we type in the word seal, and straight away all the tasks that have got the word seal anywhere in their title are instantly filtered and shown on the screen. Much of the information in RCM Desktop is presented in grids that look very similar to this one. These grids are very powerful. We've already seen how you can click on the column headings to sort. We've just seen how we can quickly do filtering. Another thing that's possible is you can group by, let's take that filter off, columns as well. So if we group by done by, then group by interval, then it does exactly what we've just asked. So everything done by the maintenance engineer is into individual groups according to task interval. So that particular one has one task, that one has two tasks, and so on. Similarly with failure modes, it's often necessary to refer to the complete list of failure modes when facilitating. Finding a particular failure mode is just as easy as it was with finding a task. So we want to remind ourselves what the failure modes are that have anything to do with pumps, and there they are. Another thing we can do with grids is to print them by clicking on this button here, and what we see on the paper is exactly what we had on the screen. So that means if we reorder and group things, so let's open up the group by box and group by action, and open all of those up, and if that's how we ask it to be printed, that's how it appears on the paper. So what you see is what you get printing of grids. Other tabs, questions and actions. This allows the facilitator to record any queries. There may be some information required that's not readily to hand, so someone gets the job of finding out the answer before the next meeting, and we can record here that they've been allocated that task and record the answer when it is given, and keep track of which tasks and questions have been answered and which ones haven't. There's an analysis diary tab. This is for the facilitator to use as they see fit. Very often it will be just to keep a record of the review group meetings, what days and times they were held, and who attended each meeting, and what progress was made. The Redesigns tab shows you a complete list of all the redesigns from the individual failure modes all together for the whole analysis. So each of these came from an individual failure mode, and it tells you which particular failure mode they came from. The Charts tab enables you to show some statistical information about the analysis, so is most useful once an analysis is complete. We can choose between pie charts, horizontal bar diagrams, or vertical column diagrams, all presenting the same information. So here we can see failure modes grouped by consequence. So in this particular analysis, hidden safety was 33% of the failure modes, and non-operational consequences was 24%, and so on. We can click on any one of those and then see how the decisions for each of those failure modes were spread about. So for hidden safety, 72% of the failure modes produced a failure finding task, 6% went to no scheduled maintenance, and so on. If necessary, you can move these around and go by decision first, and then drill down as you see fit. As with the grids, you can click on the print button, and once again what you see is what you get. Some of the other windows now. In the setup and administration window, you can specify company information, put in your company name, address, a copyright notice, and even load your own logo. The purpose of entering this information is because the logo, company name, and so on, copyright, will be printed on reports and some exports. RCM Desktop comes with a number of built-in reports on which this company information will appear, so let's have a look at some of those. We get to them by clicking on this print button, and here's the selection of built-in reports that are possible. So function list, there won't be too many of those, that won't take too long, so we can go for that now. So it's simply a complete list of all of the functions typed in for the analysis, and your copyright notice, your logo, and your company name will appear in the heading for the report. Next is failure mode summary. This one, some of the sections are optional. I'll leave them all ticked, and we'll just go through this one. Just takes a few moments to complete. Okay, and for each function we see all of its functional failures, and for each functional failure all of its failure modes, and for each failure mode we see its effects. Next one is the decision summary. This also has some options. I'll leave all of those ticked. So again, it just takes a few moments to compile the report. So for each failure mode we have now got the text, the decision that was made, and the yes and no responses to the decision logic questions, and if a redesign or a task was specified, it also shows a summary of that redesign or that task. The last one is the fault finding guide. Not much in this report because there are not very many failure modes entered yet in this analysis, but what this report enables people to do is to look up what symptoms or alarms have been experienced when a failure occurs, and use that information to zoom in on candidate possible failure modes that have caused it. So this can dramatically reduce fault finding time after a failure has occurred. RCM Desktop also allows you to design your own reports and run those, or run reports designed and written by others. By far the most useful of the built-in reports is the audit report. That has many optional sections. Once the report is all, the analysis is all finished and tidied up, it needs to be audited before being implemented, and that's what the audit report is intended for. So we have ticked all of the optional sections here, so if we ask it to print, it will take a little while, but we'll cheat and skip to the end. So here we are, the report has just finished. It took about a minute or so. The first page of the report is simply a list of contents. So the report is split up into several sections. This particular report is 88 pages long, so in the contents you get a page number for that individual section. The next page is analysis details, so this is all of the background information that was input into the Properties tab of the Analysis Editing window. After that is significant findings, so very close to the beginning of the report, so any very busy senior managers who read the report are at least likely to see the significant findings if they're unable to read the full detail of each failure mode. Following that is the operating context of the asset being analysed and its ancestor assets, then a list of the functions for the analysis, and then the bulk of the report is taken up by the individual failure modes. So for each failure mode we see its text, the function that its failure interferes with, the functional failure it causes, its failure effects, the consequences and decision for the analysis, answers to the decision logic questions, and any supporting comments that go with it, and then any other information that was entered against the failure mode, like a redesign, a task, symptoms, alarms, equipment tags, anything else that's been entered. So for each failure mode, all of the information entered against it is in one place in the report, so it is easy to go through failure mode by failure mode, ticking off page by page an audit for each individual failure mode, and keep doing that until you've worked your way all the way through. After failure modes is a summary of the maintenance tasks, so that's an overview of task titles, intervals and skills. If you've asked for it, then each of those tasks again in full detail. After that, a list of all the redesigns in the analysis, a list of any spares requirements which you have determined, if you've selected it, the analysis diary, document links, and the photos and drawings, which can be very useful to the auditor if it's been a long time since he had anything to do with the equipment. And finally, a glossary of terms. That is very useful for the auditor to do their job, but it is also a superb reference document for the equipment that was being analysed. The report can obviously be sent to a printer for printing on paper. It can also be exported to PDF by clicking on this button. A sensible file name is suggested. If it exists, we're asked if we want to replace it, and the report is very quickly exported to a PDF, which I'll just bring in so you can see it. So that's exactly what we've already looked at, but in the PDF are all of the bookmarks that make it very easy to navigate around the document at a later date. Another feature of RCM Desktop available in the Ultimate Edition is full SQL access to the RCM database. The Facilitator can build queries visually using the list of tables here on the right. So if we want a query based on failure mode, we can open up the failure mode table and start saying which fields we want, but much more useful is the ability to load previously saved queries. So let's go for task summary. You can see visually what that query looks like, and now if we run it, the results are shown in the query results tab. The output we can export in a number of different formats, so let's export it to Excel. Need to give it a name, tasks, and click on OK, and there it is, exactly as it was on the screen. For large RCM projects, you may have a large centrally administered database and a team of remote facilitators at different sites and locations around the country or even around the world. RCM Desktop understands this situation. You can create an RCM analysis in a central database, so let's assume that the demo analysis we've been working on so far in this demo was just that, created in a central database, and we now need to check out this demo analysis to a facilitator, a remote facilitator, so that they can continue to work on it. So the way we do that is select the analysis, click on checkout. Let's say we are expecting it back in about a month's time. Write any notes in there if you need to, and click on OK, and the whole of that analysis is instantly exported. So the remote facilitator will now need to import that analysis onto their laptop. So let's have a look at that. So here we are on the facilitator's brand new laptop. This is the analysis window. No analyses in it at all yet. They click on the import button, go and find the file that was exported from the central database. The file is examined with only one option, that is to import it. Import was successful. So now we have a copy of that analysis. It has a checkout history record which tells us that it was exported to this file as we just saw a few seconds ago, and its checkout state is now on loan. So this tells the facilitator this is an analysis that has been loaned to them for them to work on. So if we open up the analysis, and we do some work on it, let's say that should go to compulsory redesign. Obviously we would do quite a lot more, but we'll leave it at that for the demonstration. Close the analysis, and then we need to return it, which the facilitator does by clicking on this button. So that is the analysis now returned. The facilitator can no longer edit that analysis because its checkout state is now returned. So we need to go back to the central database. So here we are back in the analysis list window of the central database. If we select the analysis that we checked out earlier on, we can see its checkout state is still checked out. We can have a look at the checkout history. It went out on that date and it has not come back in yet. Now that it is selected, the check-in button is enabled, so if we click on that and go and select the demo that was returned by the facilitator, it analyzes the imported analysis and the existing analysis and recognizes that one is a later copy of the other, so it just needs to be checked in. So we confirm that's what we want to do. Click on next. So the check-in is now complete. The checkout state notice has gone back to normal, so we can now edit the analysis in the central database again, and the date in has now been filled in. So that's the complete checkout, check-in cycle. Sometimes a facilitator may want to discuss a failure mode with a colleague by email perhaps. In order to do that, it makes sense for the colleague to have as much information about the failure mode as possible. RCM Desktop makes that very easy to do. Let's say we're interested in discussing 1B1 with a colleague. All we need to do is click on the copy failure mode to clipboard, and we can then paste that failure mode into an email or a document. So here I've got WordPad. If I paste, then we can see everything about the failure mode has been nicely presented in rich text format into this document for the facilitator's colleague to read and comment on. One or two other odds and ends. It is possible for the user to change the color scheme that RCM Desktop runs in. So at the moment we're running in Office 2007 Blue. We can change that to not only a different color but a completely different theme, but there we are now using the Office 2007 green theme. We can also change language, so let's have a look at Spanish. All the windows have to be closed and translated, but here now is RCM Desktop with the user interface running in another language. Okay, let's just put that back to English. Finally, backup and restore. This is an option that's available only in the single user version of RCM Desktop, where the end user is responsible for making sure the data is backed up to a location somewhere different from the computer on which RCM Desktop is installed. So just say where the drive is, click on next, and without even shutting down the database, it is completely backed up. It is possible to set the software to do an automatic backup. So here we can see this one's set to back up the data every 10 minutes. That does not protect against hard disk failure or computer loss, but it does protect against accidental errors by the facilitator, such as, for example, accidentally deleting an entire function and all the 52 failure modes underneath it. If he goes back to one of the automatic backups, the facilitator will lose no more than, in this case, 10 minutes work. If disaster strikes and it is necessary to restore from a backup, then we go to the Restore tab, find the backup we wish to restore. Let's say it's located here. Click on OK. We get a big warning about the fact that we're going to lose what's currently in the database by restoring a backup. Say yes. The connection to the database needs to be closed. The backup is finished. So all we need to do is restart RCM Desktop and reopen our restored database. That's it. I'm sure there's plenty that there wasn't time to show you, but thank you very much for watching. For more information, visit rcmdesktop.com.